Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is episode number 694 with a review of Nightmare Alley. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a streaming platform near you. This week, we are talking about Nightmare Alley, which, was in theaters a long ass time ago. And in the last couple weeks, it has come out on, I guess, both HBO Max and Hulu. So lots of people have a chance to see it if you missed it while it was in theaters. We're going to talk about it. This is a story that follows a person who is a mentalist or a cold reader. And I guess my question to start this off for you, Stephen, is I know in the past when we watched different like horror films or, spooky films about like ghostly stuff, you've always talked about how you don't believe in it. But you also talk about how films scare you. I assume even, before watching this film that talks about the background of how mentalism and cold reading works, I assume that you are a man who does not buy into the spook show, as some people might call it, and you wouldn't be impressed necessarily with somebody who claims to, have views into other realms and stuff like that. But if you ever see it in person, does it still sort of give you that twinge of weirdness when you see it in person versus just like the idea of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time I specifically saw a mentalist in person. I've definitely seen magicians in person who did tricks that made me... it isn't like I ever seriously believed, oh, maybe magic is real, but the disorienting effect of I truly cannot understand how it is possible a person did it. Like, even watching, like, David Blaine's show, right? Like, or maybe not show. There was like the documentary-ish type things where a camera crew would follow him around, right? And I remember seeing ones where the trick was just like, think of a card, and then he'd like show a card printed on his chest or something. And those definitely, they would make me question, like, are human beings way more easy to read and way more attuned to each other than I thought was possible? Like there are boundaries that I think things can send me in a tailspin when I see just how well people can pull off that shit. But I feel like in general, in person or watching on a screen or whatever, it doesn't really fundamentally alter anything about me, but it does. I wouldn't say it skews me out, but it makes me question, like, is it possible that a look in your eye can betray which of 52 things you're thinking about? And like that becomes something where I start to think, well, maybe it is. Maybe some people are really, really, really good at this. That isn't really an answer, but that's as far as I can go.
But no, I feel you there. I think when I was younger, I was really, really into magic, and I was into magic in the way that I would like buy books on how to learn how to do tricks. So it's like from an early age, even though I was fascinated with magic, I knew it was all fake, but the fakeness actually became the thing that still fascinates me, right? Like you watch somebody do a trick and you are amazed at what they do. And, specifically with like reading and doing different things like that, that like the more steps involved or the more vague they are when they're pulling out their detailed information, you're like, okay, that's definitely what's going on. Or like in those situations where like massively the audience, it's like, pick a color, now take the number of the color and multiply it by 2, and that that there's mathematically only one thing on the board.
Like anything multiplied by 9, well, the digits will add up to 9 or whatever. Like there are little tricks like that are just kind of stupid.
Like so when you see that kind of stuff, you're like, okay, whatever. But then like anytime it's like somebody who also anytime a mentalist or a magician in general it pulls the person out of the audience and goes, so we have never met before, correct? You're just like, okay, well obviously you could have met before, right? Like unless I went to a show with you and they called on you, then I would be like even more spooked out because I'd be like, whoa, I know Steven's not in on it. You know what I mean?
So can I tell you the version of this that does work on me is hypnotism. Like I've never been hypnotized, but I've been to like hypnotist shows where my friends were pulled up and I watched them behave in like wild ways that were definitely contrary to how they would have normally acted. And that does send me through a tailspin of like, man, how does the human brain work? Because apparently there are more powerful possibilities than I had realized.
But there's also things where like, people collectively in a group, you give them if I gave you, if I poured out like a brewery beer for you, right? and their stuff is all super high percent alcohol, but I replaced it with something like non-alcoholic beer, and you didn't know, and I gave it to you, you'd probably like finish that and be like, whoa, I feel super buzzed, just because like you're expecting that to be the outcome of what it is, right? So, how much of hypnotism is being hypnotized or being a willing participant and doing something silly,
right?
Because and how does that line blur itself in a way that is...
Well, it's true, and I've been told that they are one and the same. Like, no one who is hypnotized would do a thing that they wouldn't in their heart have done if they were uninhibited anyway. But at the same time, it's just like, and who knows, maybe my friends were fucking with me, I have no idea, but like I remember being with friends who did a hypnotism show and then at the end seemed like profoundly embarrassed when they realized what they had done in front of the audience. And maybe that's just like, this was in my early 20s or whatever, so maybe it was still like young people just like being dumb or not understanding themselves. I don't know what it was, but that kind of stuff does surprise me. When it comes to magic, I've definitely been impressed, but I always know there is a hidden mechanic.
Yeah.
And the hidden mechanic, it impresses me that a person can pull it off. Like sleight of hand, like people can be so nimble. Like I can be staring at their hand and not know that they did a thing.
Yeah.
And I think mentalism is similar, where like you can so nimbly draw a fact out of a person that I don't even realize I gave it to you. It's an impressive skill set. It doesn't throw me into an existential tailspin or anything.
Yeah. I mean, I can watch sleight of hand magicians, and like I know that the way they held the cup at this one moment is not a natural way to hold the cup. So I know that in that moment they move the object that they were placing under that cup into this cup, because that's how these tricks work. But I still don't know how they can do it imperceptibly. Yeah. Like I can know how the trick works fundamentally, but not be able to reproduce it myself. So it still is like magic watching it happen. Yeah,
I think the trick with magic and specifically mentalism like this, in both cases, is the actual trick, the lie, the sneaky maneuver happened very quickly at the beginning, and then they bloat this whole fake procession around the answer to make you forget the little thing at the beginning. If a card trick were really like, okay, look at your card, now hold it close to you, boom, look at it, it's not your card anymore, it wouldn't work, because they would know like, oh, you just did a sleight of hand, you swapped it out. But because they're like, look at your card, now hold it close to you, now I'm going to leave the room, they like build up all this elaborate suspense, so everyone thinks, oh my God, how did this happen during that 5-minute period, rather than like, no, I was wrong at the very beginning. And mentalism is like that, right? Like we both watched In and of Itself, Derek Del Gaudio.
Yeah, something like that.
He'll come up probably again in the Soderbergh movie too. But neither of us were that impressed with it, because a lot of it did come down to that mentalism, like I know this fact about you, and because it's so unadorned, because there isn't a lot of other stuff in the way making it seem believable, for me at least, the trick was just like, oh, well, clearly you cheated. Like, you know this for another reason. There's no way you intuited 100 people's innermost thoughts, Yeah. And for me, that ruins, like, I need the pomp and circumstance a little bit to make the illusion work. And if you just go directly for it, then it can kind of break it for me.
Yeah, but in his, I did actually like that one. But I think I liked it because there is a performative aspect of what he's doing, but it is his tone and delivery of the story he is telling is not what you were looking for, which is like the like the magician's magician, like, ruffly shirt and like big explosions and stuff like that. It is just I am telling you something in a deadly serious manner, a story about the person that I believe that I am. And at the end, it's all about, now I'm telling you who you believe you are. And even though any situation in which a bunch of people walk into a room and pick something off of a wall, there's an obvious way that you can derive the answer from it, but it's still the delivery of the way it's given. Many obvious ways. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we've talked about all sorts of things, and we haven't even gotten into the crux of what this is about, which is the not fun way of how mentalism can play into things, but the more sinister way of taking advantage of people who want to get something out of this experience that is not just fun. But what do you say, Stephen, we get into our review of Nightmare Alley?
Let's do it. And to answer the hidden question at the beginning, no, I did not think this movie was scary at all.
All right. We're going to take a listen to the trailer for Nightmare Alley, and then we're going to come back and give you a review.
I will ask you simple questions. You will answer in short sentences only what you believe to be absolute truth.
Absolute truth. I can do that.
Now, brief as you can, what is your name?
Stanton Carlisle.
Are you a true medium?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Carlisle,
Doctor, how about that?
please lie down.
Can you read minds?
Yes, I can. Under the right circumstances.
Keep your answers brief.
What do I want?
To be found out, same as everybody else.
Are you in contact with the beyond?
Well, we've had our share of snake charmers in the past. We deal with them.
You don't fool people, Stan. They fool themselves.
I've given you a fortune. It's time that you delivered.
When does it end? I want to know.
If you displease the right people, the world closes in on you very, very fast.
All right, so that was the trailer for Nightmare Alley, and is the story of a man played by Bradley Cooper who, he leaves his life behind and goes off and meets up with this traveling circus and sort of integrates with that group, and then discovers that he has a talent for mentalism after, learning some of the tricks of the trade from other people at the carnival, and then goes off to start his own thing. And it's sort of the story of the rise of this man and the craft that he is trying to hone, and what may come of his exploits as he continues to become bigger and bigger and bigger. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Nightmare Alley?
So I'm going to preface by saying I have not seen the 1947 version. I didn't do my homework. A part of me thought maybe I would watch it just so I could have the real film nerd, whatever, take on this movie. Didn't do it. I'll also say, critics kind of don't like Guillermo del Toro that much anymore. I think they like him as a person, but The Shape of Water, even though it won an Oscar, it was kind of critically seen as oh, that one won in a universe where so many things could win. Why did this movie? I don't know. He's gotten a little bit of a rap as he makes things that are nice and kind of middling, which didn't gel with my feeling because I loved The Shape of Water. I think I'm just very basic. And my basicness continues because I also think Nightmare Alley is pretty freaking great. I am in this movie's corner. I don't think it is perfect. It's a long movie. We were talking about it last week when we were talking through the films we were going to watch, partly because Kimmy is listed as an hour longer than it actually is on Google, which is a shame for Kimmy.
Is it really?
Yeah. Kimmy was also listed as 2.5 hours when it is
weird.
Definitely not. And I wonder how many people didn't watch it because of that.
I feel like it's 88 minutes or something really short.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very short movie. But anyway, Nightmare Alley is fairly long, and I think it's middle third or something. I don't know. It's middle 45 minutes. This is a movie that is setting up characters. They have a starting place. They're going to end in a clear place. And then it's a movie about how they get there. I know that sounds reductive, and every movie is that. But in particular here, there are kind of very clean definitions of where characters start and where they end up. Yeah. And the middle of the movie, it wants to do something subtle and internal, which is just not what Guillermo del Toro is good at. Guillermo del Toro is not about subtle inner workings of people's minds. He is about show me the goods. But the first third of this movie, the carnival, the parade of horrors, this kind of historical, gothic, semi-plasticky, semi-creepy past that he's constructed, I loved all of that. Like, I was so into the freak show quote that Guillermo del Toro is bringing, and just the way this like incredibly star-studded movie reveals all of its characters and how they work together, and kind of peels back the curtain almost in a Penn and Teller style, and like shows you like, here is the machinations behind how some of these carnivals and tricks and stuff worked. Love that. And then the final third, ultra intense, grisly spectacle, just won me over with its over the top, like everything. I think even if structurally I don't love everything this movie does, I was just so into this movie by the time it ended and how neatly it wrapped everything in a bow. I was just like, hell yeah, Guillermo del Toro. Hell yeah. I think Bradley Cooper is very good in this movie. And he's being asked to do a kind of role that he doesn't normally have to do. I think the supporting cast is all just great. Like Rooney Mara, love to see her. Cate Blanchett is always good in everything. You know, people get small roles who are major performers, like Toni Collette, or like Richard Jenkins plays a very pivotal role in this movie, and we don't even meet him for a very long time. I just loved all of it. I thought this look into this carnival-esque world and the way it folds into a kind of noir story, the possibilities of mentalism and what it can and can't do, and how that ties with characters who might be duplicitous or might not know how to read each other. I was just totally hooked by this movie, so I was very glad that I watched it.
Yeah, I went on a few different journeys as I watched this film. I mean, like what you said, the early circus carnival freak show was amazing, and I loved that. And I loved watching Bradley Cooper try to assimilate in this group as this outsider, but then he has his own ideas for how you could make your act more performative. So it's not just quite literally shocking in some cases. It is also more showy and more like, basically he was coming into a place which didn't need him, and showing that he could bring stagecraft to the group and like enhance their experience in what they were doing. I really loved all that kind of stuff. And then he immediately just goes like, you know what? We're too good for this. And he just fucks off to do his own thing. And like that sort of separation kind of left me wanting a little bit, right? Because when you're watching the experience of the carnival, you are seeing both sides of how a trick is done. You are seeing people doing their craft, reacting to an audience, and having to sort of play in the moment, figure out what the crowd needs. And like you are experiencing the crowd reading, not watching a man who filmically is crowd reading, right? So I think that once it does that jump cut to him off on his own, the film became much less interesting to me. But then, of course, then we get introduced to Cate Blanchett. We get introduced to Richard Jenkins. Those characters, once again, start to pique my interest and get me in. I think ultimately some of the trajectory of Bradley Cooper's story required me to kind of recalibrate my mind to what type of story I was watching. Guillermo del Toro really likes fairy tales, and this story is constructed, albeit really well, like a fairy tale, where some things, are cut for time, right? It is this man who suddenly learns what took another man a lifetime to learn in the course of 3 minutes, right? And then it's all he needs to go on and do his own thing. There are people who try to bestow lessons to other people, or not lessons, but warnings about how to do things, which will all come to fruition in the future if you follow a certain track, right? And it's like there are a bunch of things that, a bunch of, bowling pins that are laid up and then knocked down, all in due time. And they all feel like, when something is set up and then it fires off later, it feels satisfying, but it also... There's part of me who sees it as a cheat. There is a moment where Bradley Cooper, has to go into cold reading because his situation is not playing out the way he's expecting to.
Yeah.
There are theoretically stakes in that moment where you should be theoretically worried for how that outcome could be. But what we are watching is somebody just like the story calls for them to succeed, so they succeed. You don't see the machinations of how they succeeded. They just succeed for story reasons, right? And it's
interesting. When I watched that scene, I very much felt like this could go either way, and I did feel like I was watching the machinations, like the moment when it flips in his head.
We might be talking about two different scenes. You might be talking about Cate Blanchett, and I'm talking about Richard Jenkins.
Okay, I see. I thought you might be talking about either scene.
But specifically the second time, it's like, I know what you are doing, and what you are doing is specifically related to one line that one character said 45 minutes ago, and I like that. I like that connection, right? I like that somebody said there is a danger in this because of this, and we are watching this because of this, and that works in the fairy tale sense. I don't buy it in the reality of, I don't think this character has earned that ability, but I think that the story calls for the character to have earned that ability. So I'm watching it play out. And I think that part of, for instance, there's a specific thing that Richard Jenkins wants to happen and is asking for. It's a request. In my head, the easy way out of this situation is, that's not how this works, guy. Sorry, right? All you have to do is say that, and then you're out of everything. There's no problem, right? There's no conflict at all. But the story requires him to want to deliver the request, right? And it's like, there are a lot of things in the story that sort of play out that way, and I don't mind it at all. Like, in the storybook framework, it's perfect. This is constructed beautifully, and it's like chef's kiss. Part of the Christopher brain goes like, I don't know if this isn't landing the way it should if I take this at face value, but if I take it as this storybook story, I love this. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I was of both minds with it. And in the end, I really, really enjoyed it. It just, the bow is wrapped so nicely by the end that like, it just feels so perfect that I can't fault the film. But in the moment, I kept having to tell myself, remember, fairy tale. And then I'd be like, yeah, this is a great fairy tale. And then it just required me to keep thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It definitely does flow with a fairy tale logic. I mean, both movies we talk about tonight are of the form where the director very much is like, let me call my shot here, 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 here. You are not going to be surprised when it happens. It's This is a little bit like mentalism. It's like a cheap parlor trick, and if you see it as a parlor trick, you might be a little frustrated by the shortcuts that it takes. Or you can decide to let yourself believe it and then be totally blown away by it. And that's kind of how I felt here. There were things that are expedient. You know, why is Bradley Cooper so good at this so quickly? What are the odds that he gets this exact moment to do this exact thing that will let him stay in the game a little bit longer? Why does he so quickly, blah, blah, blah. You know, all of the points he made are definitely valid.
Yeah.
But there also is just a part of me that, because of how beautifully well done the movie was, I didn't want to care about any of those things. Like, I wanted to believe the magic trick. And I kind of, I enjoyed that. And I think that's what Guillermo del Toro does really well, is he just conjures up a little magic trick for you and says, like, come join me, believe in this, and you are going to get rewarded by the end. You know, you're going to get your aha moment. And I thought the aha moment hit pretty damn well here.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say everything, and it would be too spoilery to really go into it, everything about the Richard Jenkins character and various escalations and stuff worked extremely well on me. Like, I would say the last 20 minutes or so of the movie, my heart was just racing. I was just full on, like, I am feeling like I'm in a theater with a big thing of popcorn and everyone in the audience is yelling, oh shit, in unison. Like, this movie just really had me, which is impressive for a 2.5 hour movie. Like, it, I don't know, it pulled that off.
No, it definitely nails it. And he's so, Richard Jenkins is so perfectly cast for that role. Like, just his voice and his presence is just like, I couldn't imagine anybody else playing that role.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very into it. It's an issue in the sense that, like, it keeps me from saying I just unabashedly love this movie, is there's the love Rooney Mara in this, and, you know, she's always great. The fairy tale aspect here requires Rooney Mara and Bradley Cooper's relationship to undergo a few different changes. And that is where I felt like the middle movie wanted to be more subtle and nuanced than it was capable of really being, because I didn't really believe the trajectories there, or it felt like it got yada 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 over all the actual like interesting internal work that would have had to happen for the characters to wind up where they are. Again, fits as a fairy tale, it's fine, but that was one of those things where I felt like, God, I should see that happen. If the whole thrust of this movie is, again, point A to point B, like, make me feel the tension as they're changing. And I feel like the movie doesn't really know how to reflect that. It knows how to have like characters in one extreme point or the other, and then the hinge points in between just have to be kind of like yada 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 over because they don't know how to represent it.
Yeah. That I mean, it was definitely yada yada over, but I felt like Rooney Mara as a whole was sort of just like, not even as the relationship, but just her character literally got nothing. I mean, she has theoretically a vital role in his act, but her herself, she is literally given almost nothing to do. She is just it would be like if you compared this to Red Rocket, it would be like if Mikey Saber convinced Strawberry to go off and join him in work, and all she did was hold the boom mic.
Mm-hmm. That is very apt. I only now realize that this is kind of a Carol reunion, though. That's sweet.
That is true. I do like that this film plays in that, like you kind of earlier you touched on Penn and Teller, and the fact that we get to see how these tricks are done. But it is interesting how they explain the way the trick is done, but it's also it's kind of like the equivalent of you saying like, oh yeah, they just fling the cards into their sleeve, but it's like, okay, I understand that they fling cards in their sleeve, but how the hell do they fling? Like you're skipping the technique. It's just kind of like, oh, there are certain words that combine with certain letters which give you keys to like what to ask, and it's like, boom, you got it. But it's like you don't really know how long it's been from when they leave the carnival to like when they're performing in their like nice fancy dinner environment. So it's like
I think it's 2 years.
Is it 2 years?
There's a little title card that says it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just didn't remember the title card, but I guess that would make more sense because 2 years you could probably learn that pretty well. But it felt like somebody who, you know, it's not like counting cards where it's a pure math thing where it's like, do I add or subtract every time a card comes out? It's like something that's a little bit more difficult, which is if one of the people messes it up, everything falls apart, and then you can only go full spook show after that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you never want to go full spook show. I will say the scene of them, I think it is supposed to be the Copacabana. I think they mentioned that. The scene of them performing there with Cate Blanchett being involved, I loved the way that flowed. It starts as let's see the mechanics of mentalism, and then it pivots into something else. And considering the stakes are pretty much nothing, you know, it's a bunch of people performing in a movie somewhere. Like I was just surprised how much it like gripped me that whole time. Yeah. And that is a moment where I think Bradley Cooper does a lot of good work of showing like subtle things about his character, like when does he pick up on stuff, how does he use it to his advantage. I was down for all that. Yeah, for sure. It is kind of funny though, because he's essentially Sherlock Holmes, right? Like the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes, right? But it is used differently, right? Like nobody, when Sherlock Holmes does it, nobody goes like, oh my God, he must be clairvoyant or something, right? They just go like, dang, he's a smart guy. When Bradley Cooper does it, you know, he's trying to play in no, there's spooky reasons why I'm doing this. But it's like I need more from him to like really get that sense. Like Sherlock Holmes, I just take it for granted it's Sherlock Holmes. Bradley Cooper is just a dude who showed up with like a suitcase and a hat and a handkerchief in the hat. You know what I mean? Like I need more to I don't really see him like in his normal experiences. I don't see him picking up on stuff that much, right? Like it's not like when we're introduced to him, he's
doing cold reading without it being a trick or anything. And then we go like, oh, it makes sense that he pulls it. It feels like he kind of goes like, how do you do this? And somebody goes like, well, I mean, somebody's face gives away a lot of secrets about them. And he goes, huh? And then he just tries it and he's good at it. And I kind of...
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw it as like he has a talent, and his talent is unrefined. So he uses it for like persuading people to do things. He uses it for kind of standard con man type reasons. And it required someone inspiring him of like, here's how you can hone it. Here's how you can leverage this to get ahead a little bit more to make it click. But I believe that about him, because throughout the movie, you know, throughout his introduction, when he's at the carnival, he is kind of getting his way over and over again without having to do very much.
True.
Like he is, you know, it plays in the moment as if he's just falling into different situations, but I think you can reconstruct the movie of him being very intentional about who he gets to know and when and why. And I don't know. I think there is a read of this movie where he has been way more intentional about reading and understanding people from the beginning. And then the movie does do a good amount of time, especially with David Strathairn's character, like the prior mentalist, who talks about like people who have this kind of intuition, this ability to read people. It tends to come from a damaged past, and it comes from a lot of vulnerability, and there's a heartache to it and an emptiness. And I thought, again, in the fairy tale sense, it just like really wonderfully lays out this idea of like, you need to be a certain level of hurt to achieve this. And so then the audience can kind of buy like, well, I believe he is hurt, therefore I believe he can do it.
Yeah. There are two things that I am going to try to beat around the bush in, because I don't know that I don't think we need to have like a full blown spoiler segment. So I'm just going to try to talk ambiguously about it. But there is for Bradley Cooper, there is a repeated motif, right? And it is something it's something he gets himself into around certain types of people. And this film is showing this repeatedly, right? As though this is a trend. But what doesn't make sense to me is the first time he does this thing, he gets one of these. The second time he gets it, it's the key to everything. Right? Yeah. And it's like, it is shown to us as though this is who he is and this is how he's gotten to where he is. But the theoretical first time, there's nothing that he got from it really other than like a keepsake, right? So that was a little bit weird. Then that ties into this other, what I thought was going to be a bookend, which was how the second time that thing happens, there is what seemed like was going to be a callback towards the end, but then the person who he's interacting with chooses to use a different method to accomplish their goals. And I was like, how is this not the way you were going to do that? And I'm talking about this versus this.
Yep. No, I gotcha. This is going to be great for the podcast.
I'm realizing now that there are ways that I can speak ambiguously and not have to edit it later, which is just do hand signals to Stephen over the webcam.
Yeah, this is our equivalent of like saying the word with the right letter and number to signal to each other what we're talking about.
Remember, Stephen, you got to put your two fingers as if you're pinching something out of the air.
Yeah, I know how to make a shadow puppet of a rabbit.
Yeah, quiet coyote. But anyways, I just those something weirds me out about those two different moments and how they interconnect together, because it seems like the interconnectedness would define how the second one would play out, but then it doesn't. And I was like, huh, interesting.
Yeah. I think they are for very different reasons, basically. Yeah. Like they parallel each other to maybe, again, in fairy tale logic talk about the cycle of certain characters or what is at the heart of them or whatever. Yeah. But I think to the actual character, they are very different and they're each unique, and the character doesn't see a pattern in it.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on this film, Stephen?
I love, and by love I mean I'm horrified by understanding what the meaning of geek was early. I think I intellectually knew this before, but I had never seen it depicted. It's basically just like taking advantage of a person at their lowest and keeping like a human being captive until they die. It's pretty fucking insane. And I didn't look it up, but I assume there is some truth to that in terms of actual carnival history.
Yeah. But some people just like biting the head off of chickens.
That's true. Yeah, and that's fine. Like, they should be allowed to do it. It's no big deal. I don't think they should be kept in a cage for it.
Yeah.
Or fed opium. The kind of tying in with that, what I like a lot about Guillermo del Toro is he makes these fairy tales. It's like sugary sweet, like things are kind of plastic even. It's like shimmering, the colors are really nice, everything looks very beautiful and soft and everything. And then he just has like grisliness. He has like blood or a limb that is no longer there or an appendage, or he has audio effects of things running over things. Like there's a giddy nastiness to him that I just think that pairs so interestingly with his like cute fairy tale aesthetic, and that shtick still hasn't worn on me. Like, it still really worked, and it definitely worked on me here.
So you're saying that you like the Cyclops baby in the formaldehyde?
Oh yeah, 100%. Give me that.
You must have loved the credits.
Yeah. Give me Enoch. I think that's his name.
Yeah. Cool. Well, what do you say, Stephen? We get to our verdicts for this film.
Yeah, I say Enoch. I answer.
Nice.
The door. Let's go.
If you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with the caveat, wait for rental, pass with the caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm going must-see. Again, I even led with criticism. I get why a person might dislike this movie. I do think there's some bloat, and it doesn't all play to Guillermo del Toro's strengths, but the parts that do just work so well. I think just like suspend disbelief, cross your eyes a little bit, and enjoy the ride, and I think it works gangbusters. So I had a lot more fun with this than I expected to, and I definitely think it is worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a recommend with a caveat. I really enjoyed it. As I said, I sort of had to recalibrate at times to what my expectations for how the story was playing out were. But in the end, I think this is a great, storybook, fairy tale kind of story. And I love the setup and payoff of so many things over the course of it. Really, really enjoyed it, but not quite a must-see for me. Well, that is going to do it for our review of Nightmare Alley. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/spoilerwarning, Facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or Instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a licensed track from artist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. That is this review. We have to, hail our voice assistants in just a moment and go off and do a review of Kimmy. So we're going to do that. But we will see you in the next episode, which is Kimmy, and in future episodes after that. Bye.
Bye.
Nailed it.